As a bisexual, radical femme, queer, trans woman, I'm especially aware of how students in the LGBTQ community are oftentimes marginalized in the classroom. If we as educators are to maximize student opportunities for learning, we must employ methods to enable each student to see themselves reflected across the curriculum. When students do not see themselves in the context of their classroom experience, they withdraw intellectually. For each student to succeed, we must create an environment of inclusivity. Cisgender heterosexual students also need to be exposed to inclusivity in the classroom. Cisgender means that a person's birth assigned sex is the same as their gender identity. If all students are immersed in a multicultural, inclusive classroom environment, they may become more compassionate and humane in their acceptance and support of LGBTQ people. What does creating an environment of inclusivity in the classroom mean? We as teachers must challenge assumptions that establish norms in our society and culture. We must intentionally take a multicultural approach in our teaching. It's often too easy to put our students into a box of white privilege, economic privilege, able of body and mind privilege, and heterosexual and cisgender privilege. And when we assume that students fit into the same box, by the material we choose to teach and the examples we choose to illustrate our points, those students who do not fit into these boxes become invisible to us. So, what can we do to create a more inclusive environment for LGBTQ students? Most of all, work to embrace principles of social justice while asserting the value of each and every student in the class. Student identities are not generally visible to us as educators, and many do not want their identities to be recognized or outed. We may not see lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or queer students in the seats, but know that diverse identities are present. Always challenge the assumption that your students are all heterosexual and cisgender. Be aware that naming is very important to students. I don't read a course roster out loud to take attendance at the first class meeting. Instead, I pass out blank cards and ask each student to write down how they wish to be named. This respects and helps to avoid marginalizing or even outing trans students by allowing them to choose how they wish to be addressed. When speaking of the LGBT community, try to be inclusive and not simply use the word gay. Gay is not a synonym for all LGBTQ folks. Challenge assumptions of heterosexual and cisgender privilege. Students who do not have power and privilege in certain parts of their lives are susceptible to systemic oppression, and many students live at the intersection of multiple oppressions. For example, an African American transgender bisexual man faces oppression because of these multiple identities, each of which carries no power and privilege in most social and cultural environments. Avoid language that sets LGBTQ students apart, creating a feeling of difference. Work to establish an environment characterized by we or us statements rather than they or them. Include LGBTQ content and materials in the course of study. Doing this will help students to feel visible and included. Require students to intentionally seek out research 3 circles removed from their own identity. Create an environment where the points of view of all students are respected, including straight cisgender students who may be struggling with inclusive points of view. Finally, don't be afraid to admit your own mistakes and shortcomings. None of us are fully knowledgeable about diversity, so be open to learning more about the many identities and issues people face in the rainbow diversity of queer communities. By following these suggestions, all your students will be given an opportunity and the motivation to learn in a safe and respectful educational environment.